And I want to thank everybody for listening to Veterans Radio today. I am Jim Fausone. It's been a pleasure to be your host. I'm a veterans disability lawyer at Legal Help for Veterans, and you can reach us at 800-693-4800 or legalhelpforveterans.com on the web. You can follow Veterans Radio on Facebook and listen to its podcasts and internet radio shows by going to veteransradio.net. And until next time, you are dismissed.
If you have a VA claim denied by the Board of Veterans' Appeals, contact Legal Help for Veterans at 1-800-693-4800. They're experts in handling cases before the U.S. Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims. Their number again, 1-800-693-4800.
We again want to thank our national sponsors, the National Veterans Business Development Council, nvbdc.org, Eisenhower Center, VA Ann Arbor Health Care System, the Vietnam Veterans of America Charles S. Kettles Chapter, Ann Arbor, Michigan, VFW Graf O'Hara Post 423 in Ann Arbor, and the American Legion Press Corn Post 46, also in Ann Arbor. They keep us on the air, as does your support. Go to Facebook, go to veteransradio.net, and support our efforts. And until next time, you are dismissed. We want to welcome to Veterans Radio today William Vollano. Bill served in the U.S. Army in the Medical Service Corps in 1955 to 1957, but we have him on to talk about his involvement in shepherding forward a upgrade package for Lieutenant Colonel Charles Kettles, whose Distinguished Service Cross was ultimately upgraded to the Medal of Honor, and that Medal of Honor was awarded to him by President Barack Obama in I lost the date already.
Yeah, okay.
2016. So that Medal of Honor upgrade ceremony was in July of 2016.
Okay.
And we're going let me just set this up a little bit. That Lieutenant Colonel Charles Kettles, who's now deceased and who received the Medal of Honor from President Barack Obama in July of 2016, it was for his saving 40 soldiers and 4 crew members on a damaged UH-1D helicopter while under fire in Vietnam in 1967, really just months into his first deployment in Vietnam. And Charles Kettles sort of was really a born, in his blood was aviation. His father was a World War I Royal Air Force Canadian and World War II U.S. Army Air Corps pilot. So Charles came to aviation, from his genetics.
That's right.
And he was a graduate of the Edison Institute High School in Dearborn, Michigan. He flew for Ford Motor Company. He ultimately got an engineering degree from what was then Michigan State Normal College, but now is Eastern Michigan University. He served in the 1950s, as a pilot with service in Korea, Japan, and Thailand. He got out. This is part of the amazing part of the story, is he got out, returned, and started a Ford dealership with his brother, but re-enlisted in 1963 when the United States needed pilots for the Vietnam War, and Charles Kettles would have been about a 33-year-old at the time. He ultimately qualified for helicopter flight and was sent off to Vietnam to join a new helicopter unit, the 176 Assault Helicopter Company, and it's in that role that he served as a flight commander and was faced with a horrific situation when a battalion-sized enemy force ambushed and outnumbered elements of the 1st Brigade, 101st Airborne Division near Duc Pho. he led a platoon of these Huey's helicopters again and again into intense fire to help rescue these men, which he did. And as he said, he kept these 44 men off the Vietnam Memorial. So the story of Charles Kettles, which we have told on Veterans Radio before, is quite incredible and is worth reading or listening to in its entirety. But we have on Bill Vollano to talk about kind of how do you get there? How do you go from receiving the Distinguished Service Cross and 50 years later getting your medal upgraded to the Medal of Honor? And in our experience, these men never ask for this. It's somebody comes along and says, oh my goodness, this should be more. And that brings us to you, Bill.
Right.
After your service, you came back to the Ann Arbor, Michigan area. You were president and CEO of a large nonprofit in Southeast Michigan, and you got involved in the Veterans History Project. Tell us about that project.
Well, let me tell you, first of all, I first met Charlie when I interviewed him for the Veterans History Project. And the Veterans History Project was established by Congress, I think, in the year 2000, and it was to collect and preserve and make accessible the personal accounts of American wartime veterans so that future generations would hear directly from the veteran about their experiences and know the realities of war. If I may talk about what we did locally, the Ypsilanti Rotary Club picked up the ball about setting up a local Veterans History Project. And we were first made aware of this by a history professor at Eastern Michigan University. After I wrote several grants requesting funds, since Congress did not provide any real assistance except for brochures and things of that sort. Well, after receiving the grants, we purchased cameras and tapes and other equipment used in converting these tapes to DVDs, which we eventually sent to the Library of Congress. We also, and one thing that I'm proud of, not that I had anything to do with it, but we also set up a local website for veterans and their families to access through the Ypsilanti Historical Society Museum. But, back to my interview with Charlie, I was nearly finished when his wife came down the stairs and said, did you tell him about May 15th? And Charlie, well, yeah, he started to describe the incident of May 15th. He, as you said, he made several trips to the war zone to deliver and pick up troops and deliver supplies and so on. And in the process, enemy fire made at least 3 helicopters he was flying inoperable, unusable after he returned to the landing zone. On his 4th trip, he had to borrow a copter from another unit. His CO very strongly advised him not to go, but Charlie went anyhow, and because he knew that there were more stranded soldiers there. When he returned to the pickup zone, the 8 soldiers would have certainly been captured or killed or whatever, and he was able to load them up. When he wanted to take off, his copter was overloaded. When he tried to take off, he couldn't get enough lift because of the load. And he described how he would get enough lift because of the load. He then described how he would get lift a little bit, then bounce down on the road, on the dry riverbed, go up a little higher, bounce again. And he went through this process several times until he really got enough lift, all the while under enemy fire. And after he described all of this, he said, piece of cake.
Just another day of flying, right?
That was, that's low-key Charlie, piece of cake. When Charlie was asked at one point what he regarded as his greatest accomplishment, his answer was typical Kettle. And he said his proudest moment, if you will, was that there were 44 names that were not on that wall in D.C., and that's how many soldiers he saved on that day. And Charlie's heroics inspired a local group to put together a book describing his and other veterans' experiences. And the title of that book is "We Answered the Call." That book, by the way, has been widely distributed to schools and libraries in this area, and of course to local veterans. Well, back to the interview. After I interviewed him, I went home, still struck by his heroics, and I called Charlie back and I said, would you mind terribly if I tried to get your medal upgraded? And typical low-key Charlie said, yeah, sure. He also gave me permission to contact several veterans who knew what transpired that day. I made about a half a dozen calls to veterans.
And Bill, what year?
All of whom declared.
What year would this have been?
I'm sorry?
What year would this have been, Bill?
This was, if he got it in 2016, it had to be 2007 or 2028.
Yeah, I saw it was about a 10-year journey. But I also saw it was less than that.
It was. Actually, I'm a rather impatient guy. I'm told by my daughter.
She's probably right.
But, it took 4.5 years of my process, anyhow. But anyhow, I make contact with these veterans. Just all of whom said, "Hey, if it wasn't for Charlie, I wouldn't be here today." Oh God, After that, I contacted Congressman Dingell and eventually, of course, Congresswoman Dingell's office. And luckily, I made contact with their worker or aide, Sharon Vesprimi. She was fabulous. We started out by getting all of these veterans who knew what Charlie had done to give us statements. And I had my own statement, too, which I don't believe in the final analysis carried much weight. But I pointed out that in my experiences at Brooke Army Medical Center in San Antonio, Texas, I witnessed many extraordinary stories by veterans and active duty military. Charlie's experiences overshadowed most of those. So that's what I said. And again, I don't know what impact that had. After getting these statements, little did we know that they had to be certified. So getting these statements certified meant another delay and took time and patience. And if I may, it reminded me of my own experiences in attempting to get a direct commission as a social worker. As a newly married person, I wanted very much to do everything I could to make sure that I had every opportunity to have my wife with me, even if it was only for a brief training period. Well, it took me 10 months to finally get my commission, and I would complete forms only to
That's the Army.
Go ahead.
That's the Army for you.
Oh, yeah. It happened that I would fill out forms and they would become obsolete. And you wonder, what? It's only a few months. But anyhow, I finally got to my local congressman, or through the help of somebody I knew. From that point on, I heard only from the adjutant general. Before that, I was talking only to civilians. And they really did not like me for some reason.
Well, Bill, this does tie into how things went with Charlie Kettles, in that if you didn't have the right congressperson working with you, it wouldn't have moved along. So how did little old you get the Congress folks to say, hey, this is worthy of advancing?
Well, this is what I keep, people call me and ask me, how do you go about doing this? And I say, first of all, you got to get to your local congressman and you got to make sure that you get an aide that really is committed, just the way Sharon was. She was committed absolutely 1,000%. So she was absolutely key in all of this, really.
And did you have to track down certified statements from those who were on the battle scene, his commanders up the chain? Who all did you have to reach out to?
Yeah, I talked to, I didn't talk to a CO, but I talked to other commissioner officers. I also talked to his gunner, who I met at the ceremony. He lost a leg, and I guess he was Charlie's only casualty, but he was absolutely committed to Charlie and what he had done. As I said, the whole process took me 4.5 years. I'm sorry, yes, 4.5 years. And it finally got cleared by the Pentagon, the Congress, and I guess the president himself. And since his performance was more than 5 years ago, we needed a special exemption by congressmen. This was a necessary process because it was more than 5 years ago. And thanks to Congresswoman Dingell and Senator Stabenow and Senator Peters, the process was approved by Congress, and Charlie got his very well-deserved recognition. Just that was great.
When we started, I started trying to line you up to have this discussion because I kind of refer to guys like you as Medal of Honor Sherpas, the guides that get you up Mount Everest. This is almost an impossible task. You said, well, it wasn't just me. It's a lot of people who were involved, and I understand Charlie's son, Mike, who's a retired Navy pilot, also helped in this endeavor. Can you explain about I'll refer to it as Team Kettles here that helped you move this along?
Yes, absolutely. Prior to the actual ceremony, by the way, I spent the better part of an hour on the phone talking to one of President Obama's aides, and practically everything I told the aide, President Obama mentioned in his presentation, as if he had interviewed Charlie himself, and it just goes to show how well prepared our president was at the time. I mean, he had aides who really helped him.
Well, and that's one of the questions I wanted to ask you about is, very few people will ever be in the room for a Medal of Honor ceremony, and it's one of those things where you wonder whether or not that event, that day, the days leading up to it, are as respectful and dignified and powerful as one might think a Medal of Honor ceremony should be. So walk us through those couple of days and how you felt going into that.
Oh, my wife and I were invited to go to Washington, and it was overwhelming. It really was. And if I can inject another personal note here, prior to the ceremony, my one claim to fame was that early in the 1950s, I had dinner with Eleanor Roosevelt, and, that was a big deal. Me and about 9 other students from the University of Connecticut. During the Medal of Honor presentation, President Obama mentioned me by name 4 times. And believe me, that replaced Eleanor as my claim to fame.
Absolutely. But talk to us a little bit about that ceremony and the build up to it, and maybe sort of what you saw from the inside that the outside never gets to see.
Well, first of all, the room was mobbed. Just people from all over the country came, and it was a very dignified presentation. The president was great. The other speakers, and I've forgotten who all they were really good. And it was overwhelmingly impressive for me and for my wife. I don't think we ever expected that kind of to be part of that kind of ceremony, and it was worthwhile.
Well, it's one of those things that, again, most of us will never really experience. But I think we can all think about, and I'd like your views on, why do we think the Medal of Honor is still important to the civilian population today? What's your thoughts about it?
Civilian population?
Yeah, what should other people take away from a Medal of Honor recipient? What's important about it?
I think they need to know that these veterans, these soldiers, went into what's called harm's way without any regard for their own safety, but they were dedicated to their fellow soldiers. And because of that, they were able to do spectacular things. And again, there was no consideration for their own safety, and that was Charlie 100%. He didn't care about himself. He talked about a mortar coming up through the floor of the copter, and just inches away from where he was sitting. It was kind of all matter of fact to him. But his saving the soldiers, and as I said before, his claim to fame was that there were 44 guys who were not on that wall. And that's impressive.
And we're talking to Bill Vollano, who is I saw him referred to, Bill, saw you referred to as an amateur historian. I don't know if you accept that mantle or not, but
oh yes.
How many veterans for the Veterans History Project do you think you've interviewed at this point?
I don't know, maybe 75, 100.
And one of the things, so Bill's doing this, and the Kettles story just stands out as so much more. But I think it's important for us to read and understand these Medal of Honor stories, because every one of those 75 or so veterans you've interviewed have some small part, similar part of where they served and did their duty to the country and didn't really worry about themselves. They were away from home, they were away from family, they might have been in harm's way. They certainly were more than inconvenienced, and every veteran has a little slice of that, the sacrifice that the Medal of Honor recipients have, I think. Do you feel the same?
I've been asked several times why I got involved in the Veterans History Project to begin with. And in addition to being asked by the EMU professor, Nelson, I had 4 uncles, a brother, and a close cousin, all of whom served in World War II. All except my brother were in combat. Two of my uncles were severely injured. One of them was on Omaha Beach in D-Day. And as I say, except for my brother, who was pretty lucky at the time, they all were in combat. My cousin was actually on Iwo Jima. My family has, from all of these relatives, not word one about them. And I think that's absolutely tragic. And it's something that we all bear shame for, not insisting on getting their history for their grandkids and our grandkids and our great-grandkids and so on, because there's nothing like hearing it from the people who experienced it. And that was my motivation, if you will.
Well, one of the things that I can elaborate for Bill here is that the Ann Arbor Ypsilanti area has always been really focused on honoring its veterans. You mentioned the book We Answered the Call. I have in front of me the book Sacrifice is Not Forgotten, Brothers Rest in Peace, that I went to find some material about you, having helped out. John Kinzinger is authored of that one, and with some stories of everybody who lost their life in Vietnam from the region. So I agree with you, Bill. I think it's important to tell these stories and get the words down on paper or in audio, video content. You're no longer a young man, are you, Bill?
No, I'm going to be 91 in 3.5 months.
So we were really happy to capture this discussion because Charles Kettles is now gone, and exactly how this came about could easily have been lost if we didn't take a little time to talk about what started as a simple interview in the Veterans History Project, and maybe more importantly, and there's probably a lesson for all of us here, when the wife comes down and says, "Did you tell him about?" That's how this all got started, wasn't it?
Got to listen to your wife. Yes, absolutely. If it wasn't for Ann, I wouldn't have asked him anything about this because I didn't get any hint of what he was doing. And she came down the stairs and said, "Hey, did you tell him about May 15th?" And we sat down again, and he went, "Yeah, okay," and he told me.
Well, it's the lead up to he broke 3 or 4 helicopters for the government on his way to this heroic act. But that's sort of I broke those. I got to give them back now. So
he actually got a bill from I don't know. It was certainly a joke for the 4 helicopters that he destroyed in this process, and he's got that. He had that framed in his house, and it's kind of a fun thing.
Well, I think your work in moving this forward, being the Medal of Honor Sherpa, if you will, recognizing that this was above and beyond the normal story and needed to be honored and retold, is so important and so critical. I'm sure the Kettles family is very appreciative of all of the work that you've done there. But on behalf of all veterans and on behalf of Veterans Radio listeners, I want to thank you, Bill Vollano, for what you did here to preserve this history, as well as the history that you're preserving for the other 75 men that you've interviewed.
Well, thank you. And again, much of the credit goes to Anne and certainly Sharon Vespremi, who, without her help, I don't think we would have gone anywhere. She was fabulous.
Well, thanks for spending some time today with Veterans Radio.
Well, thank you for having me.
And I want to thank everybody for listening to Veterans Radio today. I am Jim Fausone. It's been a pleasure to be your host. I'm a veterans disability lawyer at Legal Help for Veterans, and you can reach us at 800-693-4800 or legalhelpforveterans.com on the web. You can follow Veterans Radio on Facebook and listen to its podcasts and internet radio shows by going to veteransradio.net. And until next time, you are dismissed.
If you have a VA claim denied by the Board of Veterans' Appeals, contact Legal Help for Veterans at 1-800-693-4800. They're experts in handling cases before the U.S. Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims. Their number again, 1-800-693-4800.
We again want to thank our national sponsors, the National Veterans Business Development Council, nvbdc.org, Eisenhower Center, VA Ann Arbor Health Care System, the Vietnam Veterans of America Charles S. Kettles Chapter, Ann Arbor, Michigan, VFW Graf O'Hara Post 423 in Ann Arbor, and the American Legion Presscorn Post 46, also in Ann Arbor. They keep us on the air, as does your support. Go to Facebook, go to veteransradio.net, and support our efforts. And until next time, you are dismissed.
Okay, round two. Name something that's not boring.
A laundry? Ooh, a book club. Computer solitaire, huh?
Ah, sorry, we were looking for Chumba Casino. That's right, ChumbaCasino.com has over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.